This is The Flower of Freedom by Deborah J. Reeves. We're on chapter 115, Honeymoon Season. Please, we're anxious to begin, so will you rush in, leaving your burdens outside the door? Make yourself comfortable because there is no place that you have been more welcome. And we sincerely extend that as long as you bring your good heart and your good intentions with you. Here we go. Chapter 115, The Honeymoon Season. Jacques Lagarde was never one to take a back seat to anyone, not even his daughter. So he sent out a few invitations of his own. One of the people who had been invited to the wedding was unable to attend because of other commitments. Bianca's father had hoped that his new friend Hans Schmidt would come and sit at the bride's parents' table with him, but it was not to be. Hans had a previous commitment that he could not alter. With apparent distress, Hans told Jacques that it would be one of the great sadnesses of his life to be forced to miss the occasion. Then he asked Jacques if he could keep a secret. It was then that Hans told Bianca's father that he knew someone who knew people who had arranged to have his and hers Cadillac cars delivered to the driveway of the young couple's new home. One would be a creamy white and the other would be black. He swore Jacques to secrecy about the source of the gift. His only request was that he, Hans, would be secretly supplied with an entire wedding album with every available photograph. Overwhelmed by his new friend's great generosity, he agreed to Hans' terms, and he thanked him with genuine gratitude, reflecting that he had realized that Hans was wealthy, but he had not understood his deep level of regard and affection for Jacques himself. Why else would he be so generous to a young woman he had met only twice? Dr. D and Jean-Claude had flown to Paris for the wedding. Fan and Michelle stayed at home to mind the children, and they kept Car and Desi while the others attended the wedding. Bianca did not want children at her wedding, and secretly they were all relieved. Aki sat with the Canadian contingent, as it became known, and he introduced them to the sparkling members of French society. At the end of the evening, he was entrusted with all of the wedding gifts, which were mostly in cash and checks. Bianca trusted Aki to invest them wisely for them. Her parents endorsed the plan, and Bertie agreed. Aki had seen the lay of the land, and he ensured that the money was invested, and he gave Bertie the signing rights on the account. Jean-Claude's wife, Fan, had a cousin who had been widowed. She had left British Columbia with her husband, and they had started a business on the Caribbean island of Martinique. It was a beautiful setting, and the tourism-based business thrived. Then, Janie's husband died unexpectedly. She stayed, and she was now rumored to be living with an islander, much to the chagrin of her very traditional parents. When Colette remembered that Fan's cousin had honeymoon cottages that she rented out, she told Oscar, who approached Bertie to ask if he and Bianca might like to honeymoon there. Bertie agreed, saying that Bianca had told him to plan their honeymoon. Oscar and Colette took much of their savings and paid for a hotel room in Paris, air flights to Martinique, and accommodations for 2 weeks on the island. They gave Bertie money for the duration of the trip. Bianca was appalled by the primitive cottage, but she was enthralled by the volcanic mud baths that Janie's boyfriend Screw had built into the tropical valley nearby. Janie and Screw collected them in the Jeep to take them to their resort. On the way, with Janie sitting in the back seat with Bertie and Bianca sitting in the passenger seat next to Screw, Bianca said, "Okay, what's the name that your mother gave you?" When he responded, "Screw," there was not much more to be said until they pulled up in front of the cottage. She turned to Bertie and she said, "You expect me to spend my honeymoon in that shack?" Bertie was embarrassed, but before he could find words to respond, Screw said, "People come here for the natural beauty. If you look, you'll find it. If you want, I will be happy to drive you to one of those plastic high-rises on the beach." Bianca sniffed and responded, "Too late for that. Take the bags in. We'll stay the night, but there better not be any wildlife in that shack." Screw sniffed back. He looked at Bertie with compassion and he retorted, "No risk of that if you're in there." The next morning, Janie had left tropical fruit and juices on the porch, and just as she was turning to leave, Bertie came through the door looking thoroughly refreshed from a long night's sleep. He wanted to ask Janie about the activities on the island. She told him all about the typical tourist activities, about an amazing park and the beaches, and then she led him to the cliff edge. All the way down the side of the cliff, not far from the cabin, there was a long set of handmade wooden stairs that led to the bottom of the valley. At the bottom, there was a changing hut and 3 pools of water. She told Bertie that Screw had constructed them by hand. Bertie was astounded, but he thought that accounted for Screw's body, which was nothing but corded tendons and muscle. Hauling enormous boulders and constructing those pools by hand would produce such a physique, he reflected. Much later, Bianca awoke, and after she had demanded to do all the touristy activities in civilization, she asked Screw about the pools that Bertie had told her about. Screw was acting as a gracious tour guide, and he offered to collect some volcanic mud if she would like to try out the pools of water. He explained the pools were sited where they were because hot water trickled out of the cliff and into the pools. The first one was the warmest, and the lower ones were somewhat cooler because of the addition of a stream of water that he had diverted into the pools. He told her that slathering herself in volcanic mud would be very good for her health, and going for a swim to remove the mud was also therapeutic. Bianca liked that idea. Bianca and Bertie spent most of their honeymoon naked and covered in mud in the very private valley. Each morning they would descend the long flight of stairs, strip off their clothing, and every morning Screw would leave a basket filled with volcanic mud covered with damp leaves next to the food he delivered to the porch. Bertie and Bianca would slather each other with mud and explore the little valley until it had dried on their bodies. That's the end of chapter 115. Thank you again for coming. Please consider giving us a thumbs up and subscribe so that you won't miss any of the chapters. But the truth is, we'd miss you if you weren't here. So please do it. Thank you. Bye-bye.